In this video, I've got something a little bit different prepared. So if you're a big fan of photography, I'm sure you are familiar with the name Ralph Gibson. Ralph is one of the great photographers of our generation. He's part of the New York School of Photographers, with his career originating in the 1960s. He was friends with Robert Frank. He worked for Dorothea Lange. He has been amongst the heavyweights. And I've featured him a number of times on this channel. In the last couple of years, we've become really good friends. I think the world of Ralph. I've always looked up to him and his work. And something that I'm really excited about is the two of us are actually going to be doing a workshop together in New York City. So this workshop is going to be next month. It's going to be April 5th through 7th. We would love to have you join. And I think there's 2 slots available still. So if you want to join us, it will be awesome. But this is actually something that we've been planning for about 2 years now. And the way that this works is Ralph and I will get on the phone or we'll get on Zoom and we start having a conversation trying to figure out what we want to do for our workshop. And the whole idea of this workshop, it's called The Next Level. It's something that every photographer struggles with, no matter where you are on your journey as a photographer. But it's trying to figure out what is next. How are you going to get next step better? What is going to improve your work? And we thought it'd be really interesting to have a limited group of people that we could kind of treat everybody on an individual basis and bring out the best of what it is they're trying to do and help them figure out what is next for them. You're going to come out of this with a portfolio of work. It's going to be really cool. I will put a link in the show description if you're interested in signing up. But today I've got something a little bit different. Whether you choose to join us or not, I think this will be beneficial to you. I talked Ralph into letting me record our last Zoom call together, and it was a pretty good one. We had some really interesting things to talk about, and it really reflects upon the workshop that we're putting together. It's this whole idea in this philosophical sense of how to improve oneself as a photographer and how you get to the next step in your journey. So without further ado, this is my conversation last week with Mr. Ralph Gibson. One of the things you and I were discussing very early on was the idea of, when we both started as photographers, you're always trying to figure out what is the next level. Where can you push yourself? Where can you push your work to? And it's a very difficult thing to do if you're just in a vacuum on your own. And what are those experiences and how does one get to what you consider to be, quote unquote, the next level? And that's kind of the heart of what we're putting together.
The hardest thing for a, an advancing photographer to do is to really be able to read and edit their own work. In fact, it's so difficult to know how to edit your own work, read your own work, understand your own work, that there are professionals who do it. They're called photo editors, which are usually failed photographers who become very good editors of other people's work. Now, I believe inherent in every serious practitioner's body of work are indications of how they see on a purely individual basis. And that's what I like to address. And I think we would have a great opportunity between the two of us to really highlight some of these characteristics in the portfolios we'll be reviewing and the assignments.
Oh, I think so. And I think, one of the other things we were talking about early on too is when you begin as a photographer and even in the intermediate and sometimes advanced levels, there is a disconnect that happens. We're inspired by people that we enjoy looking at the work of, and then we start to vision ourselves as photographers, and then so we see something, and then that becomes a picture. But then there ends up being this disconnect between what we saw versus what we got, which is an interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Learn how your lens sees, and your lens will subsequently learn how your eye sees. Now, what you are talking about is a disconnect that occurs between basically what we'll call the photographer's eye and the photographer's lens. He sees one thing and the camera sees something else. And of course, the camera always wins. No doubt about that. The photographer better learn to listen because to his camera, because without a shadow of a doubt, that's one of the absolutes that I accept without debate is the autonomy of the work itself. I realized driving over here that we speak English fluently. I'm not sitting around wondering where I should put the verb in my next sentence.
Right.
I speak it.
Yeah.
Now, what would be the equivalent of speaking or photographing with the same aspect of fluidity, the same qualitative fluidity? Well, as children, we were taught grammar and syntax. I believe there is visual grammar and I believe there is visual syntax. And the primary aspect of that would be certainly in the perception of forms per se, of any object you're looking at. What is its shape? What is the meaning of its shape? This is what we will call the syntax of visual dialogue. And as photographers, uh, we take this idea all the way into the abstract. Seeing the abstract in reality is basically an enlightened form of syntactical photographing. And so I like whether or not what I'm saying has scientific or academic merit. It gets me in places I wouldn't have gotten otherwise with
Sure,
my
but
camera.
you could use that. I mean, for anybody who enjoys, art for its value, there is something being described, and I love the fact you brought up abstract because, if you go to a museum and you look at ex painters from the '50s, de Kooning, Pollock, they say something, and there is a visual language that's there, and it's not so much something that always has to be concrete. This is a car. This is a flower. It becomes an idea of shape and line, texture, things that start to visually communicate. One of the things that you've always said to me that I love is that as photographers, we are responsible for every square inch that comes into that final printed image. If there's something that doesn't belong there, it dilutes that communication. Everything must work together. So understanding line, understanding gesture, understanding those things is a form of visual communication. I think that's so important for any artist to understand.
Well, I'm to the point with that idea that I'm interested in how my culture informs, for example, how I perceive line. You see, you see, for you talked about all these aspects of visual communication. Some shapes are absolute and speak everywhere in the world. Square, circle, triangle are widely perceived and understood. Certain colors are red, green, stop, go. This is a semiotic that is experienced on a global basis. I'm speaking for 8 billion people right now, and and addressing a visual aspect of that's shared by everybody on the planet.
Well, yeah, you go, and that's in use. If you go to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you're at the airport, chances are you can probably find the bathroom because they're using a syntax that describes where you need to go, the exit, the bathroom, the luggage claim, the rental car. You could use pictograms for something like that. So there is a literal communication that happens with that. But then you get into maybe an interpretive field where you look at a de Kooning piece and there's a use of line, let's say, and maybe it makes you uncomfortable, but something about it is very interesting or pleasing to me. And that opens up a lot of possibilities, I think, visually.
Well, in the workshop, uh, each member, each practitioner will be coming to the workshop with a slightly similar, slightly different set of requirements. The real question is how does one strategically enhance and improve their work by design? How do you go about it? Well, one of the things I have done is I like reading a lot of philosophy and a great philosopher, Charles Péguy, a French philosopher poet, discussed the idea of taking one set of protocols, a given set of protocols. Let's say hypothetically, I'm going to use the Leica M rangefinder with a 50 lens at f/16. And no matter what I'm going to photograph, I will apply that set of protocols to a constantly changing set of circumstances. You see, now this, of course, will lead one to their individual visual signature, assuming one hangs in there long enough to wait for the medium to bestow this upon
Do you think it's
himself,
freedom through
herself.
constriction then?
Well, I have always worked within a set of specific limitations that always uh, led me to an infinitely broader horizon than I would have otherwise arrived. You see, it's the limitations that really open the doors. It's not
Absolutely.
just drifting around the street shooting from the gut. I don't think that gets you too far.
I shoot what I feel, Ralph.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful quote that you said the other day that I want to get you to talk about too, because I think it's so great. But the threshold of perception.
It suggests simultaneously two things to me. It suggests that a threshold is an inherent characteristic of my humanity. And if there is a threshold, it suggests there is something behind it, beyond it as well. And at a Thanksgiving dinner with all my artist friends out here in Long Island, I said, everybody at this table, we've been creative people all our lives. And no matter what we do, painting, sculpture, music, photography, writing, sometimes, once in a while, you produce something and the results are even better than you were trying for. Is there any photographer who's going to take this course will certainly understand what I just said. Now, so the question is, how do you access that particular atmosphere, that particular emotional, intellectual, perceptual space? Obviously, the people we admire the most, the Picassos, the Da Vinci's, they got there on a 9 to 5 basis,
Sure.
you see.
Sure.
Now, I like knowing, that's why I've said I'm good enough as a photographer to know how good I really could be. And I look at people's work and I can see how good they could be if they could,
Coming
you
back
see.
around to what we started talking about, though, the whole idea of understanding what you're looking at when you look at your own work and understanding how to. The student, in all intents and purposes, could be their own best teacher. It's a matter of having somebody that's there to show them how to access that, I believe.
What you're referring to is essentially learning how to learn.
Yeah,
And and it is inherent in the work, but beyond that simple sentence, things get very complex.
right.
Now, it is inherent in the work, but wherein lies its origin? And is in asking such questions, we are quickly defining one's relationship to the medium of photography. Uh, I have said many times that uh, I don't want to make photographs. I want to make a photography.
Mm,
I know that the medium, I could look at that because I've known so many of the great masters as we've discussed,
sure.
But I used to go visit Cortez 2, 3 times a week at 2 Fifth Avenue. And he wasn't a photographer, he was photography.
Mm,
When when Brandt or Cartier-Bresson or these guys would say something to me, this wasn't just this just wasn't textbook, And I think what ultimately I've never stated this before, but if I were to be asked what it is I've learned from my proximity to the masters, it's what essentially was how to listen to my own work. It started with Dorothea when I was 21 years old. I can remember the way she spoke about me and it and her work and the photography.
Many years ago, when you had a photography teacher loan you his M2, I believe it was, and you
Yeah.
decided right then that was one of your major life decisions, is that the Leica rangefinder could do everything you wanted it to do. You still shoot on that format today, even though it's gone to digital. It's still at the heart M lenses and a rangefinder. Talk a little bit about that and a little bit about technique. This is something that's not discussed to a great deal in photography. In classical music, violinists will stick to one instrument that they feel provides everything that they can do, and they work very meticulously on the technique that they're going to use to enable them to do those things. And this is something that we don't cover in photography. It's something that you do talk about quite a bit.
As I was learning camera handling, walking around in the Market Street in San Francisco, learning how to hold the camera and balance it. Uh, I think the rangefinder was without a shadow of a doubt the very first ergonomic experience that I could have had as a photographer for sure. Uh, everything else was bulky and awkward. I had been working with a Rolleiflex, which was looking down, not up, and uh, somehow or other, I understood that. It was one of my early epiphanies. I remember saying to myself, "This camera is capable of doing anything I'm capable of asking it to do." And as a as my concerns became more abstract, I needed a certain degree of camera handling skill. It's the same thing, as a musician. If you play several hours a day, or if you're shooting pool every day, you maintain a certain level,
Yeah, sure.
and so I realized that as long as I maintain uh, degree of uh, a certain degree of fluidity within my entire nervous system, working with the camera. It doesn't just start with the fingertips. It's balance, it's peripheral vision, it's many different components. But it's one of the reasons that I've made other decisions, which has had to do with just being able to continue to photograph. I mean, where does the body end and the camera begin, or vice versa?
There actually is an interview that someone did with you back in the '80s. I think you've seen it. It's floating around the internet on YouTube. And at that time, you were using the rangefinder, and you were explaining in one segment of that interview your process and how you went about it, which was something very similar. And the quote that I love that you use in that was, I'm looking for shape, I'm looking for line. It was the color walls that you were doing back then. And I think the quote was that essentially you can end up with a picture of nothing, but that effect is the something. But I love that.
That's good. I'm glad I said that. I don't remember that. That's
No,
great.
that's exactly what you said. It was, it's essentially a picture of nothing. And that is an interesting way of, if you consider the parallels, photography is such a unique medium, and it struggled its entire existence to be accepted as an art form formally. And there are certain things that you just have to approach differently in photography. We've talked about this a lot, the idea of painting, the idea of adding a line, adding another line. We don't do that. We don't draw. The lens does it in an instant. I think abstraction is another one of these issues that you and I both talk about a lot, where if you look at Pollock and with the camera, you can't throw paint at a canvas. You're not going to drip it from above or do special techniques or some of the things that they did. So how do we deal with this abstraction? Because it would be very easy to flip the camera out of focus, spin it, take a photo of whatever. But then when you start dealing with things where you're looking at something in the composition that maybe is an effect, as you said, of something else, then you start introducing layers of abstraction that are done very differently than what we consider traditionally to be abstraction. Would you agree?
Well, I like the term layers of abstraction because that tends to explain why you never get to the end of abstract art, but sometimes you do get to the end of the figurative art and its content. Sometimes it just says what it says beautifully, might be complex, but with truly abstract art, what happens is that it changes while you're changing. Because as time passes, you have many different aspects of your personality, how you're feeling in the course of the day. And you look at a non-objective work, an abstract work. I'm looking out the window as we talk, and I, I think that reality is the highest form of abstraction. And I'm looking at these trees and looking at how the branches intermingle. And it's winter, and I could say, trees in winter. In Italian, alberi in invierno, or in French is les arbres dans l'hiver, And so we're talking about the same tree in three different languages. It is the same, but different. It's different because of inflection, intonation, delivery, and how the delivery is subsequently received. When I started in the Navy in '56, most films were around ASA 25, then it went to 40, then it went to 100. And everybody thought the ASA 100 was like Mach 2 on an F-16
It's
jet.
really high ISO.
Yeah. And so yes, it's true. I started with film, but it was barely film. You know,
Yeah.
and I think having always moved at this oblique angle to the medium. By that I mean the medium was advancing, and because it was really advancing very fast technologically because of cinema, they needed better films, and the cinema industry is what drove photography. Better lenses, faster films, higher
Better lighting.
resolution, all
Yeah.
these sort of. But I've always been moving at an oblique but parallel angle to the evolution of the technological component. And I guess every photographer pretty much does that one way or to one degree or another, even people who are just working on the iPhone level. I'll have to start giving some thoughts to the balance between technology and reality, or technology and nature. Which is a bigger part of our lives now?
Right? Yeah. I mean, the technology is consuming. Apple's new product is this big headset that allows you to live in both the physical and the virtual worlds, which to me is a little bit disturbing on some level. I like to be able to select where my attention is.
I'm a little hesitant to even put it on.
Yeah. Don't hurt yourself.
Something might go wrong. I might not come back. Technology breaks down all the time. What happens if it crashes and it's where do I go?
We upload you to the cloud. That's the.
That's the ultimate hack.